We'll bring in no one better than the man himself who covers the college football for CBS Sports. That is Dennis Dodd. Dennis, really appreciate a few minutes here. How are you doing on this Monday, Memorial Day Monday?
I'm great. Just relaxing a little bit, Ryan, and ready for the story of the year to continue covering that, which we all know what it is, this virus.
Oh, absolutely. And speaking of which, so before we get to college football, the question I've had on the show throughout the day is, obviously with the virus, Memorial Day weekend is a little bit different. What's your go-to Memorial Day plans? Is it a hike? Is it going to the beach? Playing golf? What is your ideal Memorial Day weekend plans that usually try to get in, obviously when circumstances are pretty much normal here?
Well, ideal, aside from these unique times, would be to barbecue or play some golf or both. But my wife and I are sheltered in place, hunkered down. Actually, may look for a barbecue pit today, but that's about it. It's different times right now.
It absolutely is different times. I'm with you. My go-to activity is the beach, and obviously, especially here on Long Island, it's a little bit tougher to do than most places with the restrictions we have. So hopefully, like I said, it's really throwing our spring into a tizzy, and at least the summer as well, really throwing a wrench into it. But hopefully, fall obviously is what we're looking forward to hopefully have that resume as close to normal as possible. So I'm curious, Dennis, we'll start off with this. Last week I think was, for at least for me personally, the most confident I've been that college football could return to as close as normal as possible, and be maybe even on the field as close as possible. And I'm not gonna lie, yesterday you heard Michigan President Mark Schlissel, I hope I pronounced that correctly. Schlissel. Yeah. Throw some cold water on that, where he said, if Michigan's not open 100%, if every student's not back in Michigan, we're not having fall sports. Does hearing that from him, from a president of a major college football university in Michigan, does that kind of change your thoughts on the viability of a season at all? Or for you, is your optimism level the same, it was last week as it was maybe Sunday afternoon after you heard Mark Schlissel say those comments?
It was significant only because who was saying them. And, the president of Michigan, 112,000 seats or whatever it is, no matter what you think of Jim Harbaugh, one of the biggest programs in the country. I thought from the beginning, or when this thing started to take shape, that we would not take off with all 130 teams. Now, it would be significant if Michigan wasn't among them, but some of the plans being talked about are trying to find opponents, and I'm talking about all over the country, trying to find opponents the week of a game if there's an outbreak. I mean, that's where we are now to try to get this season in. I want to make sure people understand this, that a lot of this is on the come. There's confidence they can get it in, but they're pushing the envelope. I just heard today on television that, in some places we're not even through the first wave, forget a second spike. So, and it's significant. The Michigan president is I think an immunologist. So he's a medical professional, and he sees this. And Michigan as a state has had some tough times to get over this. So, yeah, it's significant.
So I'm curious, right now on May 25th, what is your optimism level that a season could be played as close to normal as possible? You have 50%, 60%, or even lower than that?
You mean 12 games by all 130 teams?
Let's say, how about Power 5? I'm with you. I don't think everyone's going to play. How about we just limit to Power 5, having somewhat, maybe even 11 games, but as close to a normal season where there's no asterisk and there's no real feel that this is illegitimate. How about that?
Yeah, I think on May 26th or whatever it is, it's really hard to even predict that. I've just taken the Fifth Amendment and just said I think there'll be college football played this fall, this calendar year. I think we've got about 13 twists and turns before we even know what it's going to look like. So, and you mentioned it, Ryan. Last Monday, I didn't feel that way. I didn't feel confident that way. And I think it was just a week ago. It seems like a month ago, the California governor said that there could be pro sports in June, and whoa, okay, that's pretty big. Especially the week before, when the California state system, the trustees had said there would not be students on campus, which kind of at least shut out 3 teams from the Mountain West. So I think we've come a long way. I think it's very, very cloudy as to what it's going to look like. Is the SEC going to play? I think part of the SEC is going to play. They seem to be the leader here. They're coming back. They were the first conference to announce they were coming back. So, yeah, it remains to be seen.
Talking with Dennis Dodd, CBS Sports College Football National Reporter. Follow Dennis on Twitter at Dennis Dodd CBS, at Dennis Dodd CBS. Always have some great nuggets if you're a big college football fan like myself. So, Dennis, I'm curious, right? Because we heard a lot of university presidents, athletic directors, conference commissioners. Basically, they're the ones talking publicly about their thoughts on if a season could resume, when it could resume. I'm curious to get your thoughts because The Athletic last week talked to 45 players anonymously, actual, D1 football players, and did a poll of, how they would feel safety-wise if they were resumed, what their concerns are. For the most part, again, out of the 45, it's a small sample size, but the majority said they want to play. So I'm curious from, the people you've talked to, are school, whether it's school presidents, athletic directors, or anyone talking to the actual players about their thoughts and concerns since they're the ones actually taking the risk? Or is it for the most part, they're only talking with university presidents, conference commissioners, and the NCAA about getting a season resumed in some sort of fashion?
Yeah, that's a great point, Ryan, because up until that point, and it was a sample size of 45, and it was a good story, when you would ask these stakeholders in the game, if anybody talked to players, and there'd be kind of crickets. They'd give lip service about the student athlete, advisory council and all this other stuff. But no, I mean, that's a big part of this because they don't, unlike pro athletes, they can't negotiate their working conditions. They don't have a union. And I'm not necessarily advocating for a union, but they don't have that power. They're going to do whatever they're told. I think part of this is a huge liability factor for these schools and athletic departments. Are these players going to be made to sign a waiver that says you are not going to sue the school if you catch any kind of contagious disease? Because you can't just make it coronavirus. Because what is coronavirus and what is the flu? What is the difference between that? And I saw evidence in a Chronicle of Higher Education story last week where the president of UTEP was asking the vice president and education secretary for a blanket liability protection in this. And I think that's a huge part. It's because somebody or some staff is going to test positive. They're going to catch this. I would dare say somebody's going to be hospitalized. And then what happens then? Is that a week of a game? You just cancel? Is it a forfeit? Is it no contest? You shut it down for 2 weeks? None of those questions have been answered because it's going to happen. The statistical probability says it's almost 100%. So they've got to get past that. Do the players want to play? Absolutely. They want to play. But they've got to be as safe as possible. The stakeholders will never do this, but the best way to do this is not play the rest of the calendar year. Let this thing wash over the country, maybe play next spring. But look, let's be honest. Financially, they can't afford not to play, and that's what's driving a lot of this.
I'm with you, and that's why I'm with you, Dennis. I think in the academic year it will be played, but you're right. It seems like it's trending towards the fall, but there was a thought out there that a spring season could be the safest with fans, with maybe, again, with testing and hopefully a vaccine or something. Because even in the athletic article, you had one quarterback throw the question, to your point, like what happens if someone gets sick and if they have underlying health issues or, God forbid, it gets serious. It's not, we still don't really know a lot of. There's so many questions, right? It's not guaranteed that if someone who's 18 to 22 will get it and then basically have flu-like symptoms and be fine. It could easily, unfortunately, turn, like you said, turn quickly, and then who's liable, and then what happens? Like it's like you said.
The coaches who are in the risk factor category. A lot of these coaches are in this age group where they're susceptible to getting it. So how do you keep all those people separated? I don't know.
It's a great point. Nick Saban, Mac Brown, those two are prominent figures in the sport, and like you said, are at risk for sure with their age. It's going to be a lot of questions that hopefully will get answered. We're talking to Dennis Dodd of CBS Sports College Football Reporter. So, Dennis, I'm curious then. So we talked about, obviously, there's, I feel like, two main challenges, or the biggest challenges getting looked at for college football is, can we get the season started? I feel like not a lot of people are talking about once the season started, can we keep it going? So what's the bigger challenge in your mind? Is it getting the actual season started, or once it's started, if it's close to or on time, keeping the season going? Because we always hear about the second wave coming, in October, November. What's the bigger challenge in your mind, getting it started or keeping it going once it is started?
Oh, clearly keeping it going, because aside from not playing at all, that's the biggest concern, where you'd have an outbreak somewhere, or look, the president shuts down the country again, or states shut down the country, and you can't play. Then you're just like it's suspended in midair, and what do you do? That's the worst possible outcome. And Bob Bowlesby, the Big 12 commissioner, has mentioned that several times. They've got to, do this as prudently as possible. And if that means starting in October or starting in November or starting next year or playing a truncated schedule, then that's the way it's going to have to be. But as I mentioned earlier, this is just kind of wandering into the wilderness a little bit. That yes, they need the money. The best case scenario would be to let this wash over the country, and when they step out over that diving board and start playing games, it's a lot of hope that they don't get shut down again. We saw what happened yesterday in some of these, or over the weekend, with some of these people gathering in some of these Memorial Day festivities. Not smart. Bringing students back to campus and athletes is assuming they don't go to bars and don't go to parties. That's going to happen.